In this next section on outlining, we're going to talk about two different types of outlines. One is the melodic practice, and then we're going to move on to right and left hand combinations. The first one on melodic practice is very helpful. In fact, to be honest, it's my favorite way to practice myself. When I'm first learning something, I find that this really helps me. And it's no more than science. It's getting the right brain and left brain to work together, to teach each other. This first piece, which of course is in every book out there, is from the Essential Keyboard Repertoire Volume 1, but you'll find it everywhere. This is the famed Petzold Minuet in G from the Anna Magdalena Notebook. And so instead, well, you wouldn't teach them that way anyway. But rather, one way to do it, rather than just teaching the right hand, which is good, how about the second week taking those first two lines and let the left hand imitate the right, so it's as if they are playing the melodic line in unison. It's fun. The left hand is imitating the right, and the left hand is allowing the right hand to learn faster. This is a really quick way to learn what's going on in each hand and let the other hand teach the other. Now, the one thing you want to know about this is don't get hoyle and concerned about, oh, but there's got to be right fingering in the left hand. Let it do what it's going to do. That's not the purpose of it, is to have perfect left hand fingering if I'm on a right hand melody. So I might do this when trying to get it hands together. I might do this. Now here's really good experience. Let them play their left hand alone once. Work through some of the stumbles. Now, what if you double it? Now, there's several benefits to this. One is that you're doubling it so that the right, not only is the left brain teaching the right brain in this case, because it's always the opposite, it's that the right hand is helping your student in their ear hear the left hand much more clearly than if they were just playing this, because what happens? They start performing, they're busy thinking their right hand melody. If there's going to be a slip up, often it's the left hand that falls out. Another wonderful way is to take what you just did and take it up an octave. Extra practice, another place on the piano, training the ear, yet every time you move it to a different position, you're training the ear to hear it a little clearer or in another way, and that enhances when you get to here. And so you can do these very simple outlines that don't require breaking down a measure in different beats, which is a more advanced outline that we will be talking about at another time, where you open up from back to front by the beat. And that's not quite this level yet, I've discovered. So this allows them ways to work on right-left hand combinations. Another piece everyone knows that's in multiple things is the Robert Schumann Album for the Young, Melody, Opus 68, number 1. Now again, it's not the right hand. That's not what's going to hang them up. What's going to hang them up is this left hand that then they have trouble connecting two notes in the left for the one note in the right, the 2/8 against quarters. But you are helping that if they learn their little rotation with both hands. Another trick to working toward that goal, let's say they've played the left hand alone, and then you come up with your left hand and double them, which you probably already do. Then get them to start to do it. It teaches the rotation motion better, and hearing it in the right hand starts to break down some of those barriers that they're going to have when they do this. Now, how can you make that work? Well, you can use your blocking in the left to the melody in the right. So they're blocking 2/8 in the left to the melody in the right. Here comes your chorale again. There is a sneaky way to start to get them thinking, at least you've cut it in half. Instead of 8/8 notes, they're thinking 4/4. That's an aid in getting them to start to hear more musically by thinking the larger picture instead of just each individual 8th note. So this is a great way to assign it for a week. And then, when you open that up from there, you don't get that stumbling. It's going to be more musical. So by playing around with these different combinations in your practicing in the lesson and hopefully assigning one type of practice that they can do, then you're going to enhance it. Even if they can't help themselves and they go home and start playing it the way it is, you've set the seeds down and fertilized the ground for a different way of hearing it. You come back to the lesson, you do more practice the way we're talking about here, and it can only enhance what they're doing at home, even if they aren't quite breaking it down the way we hope they will once they become more mature players and more mature practicers. I think the biggest issue with us with students is how they practice at home. Often I'll tell a student, I don't doubt you sit down and practice, but often if they've had teaching before, they're just playing through the piece. And we want to give them structure and curriculum ideas for how to practice intelligently. And these outlines help tremendously. Now let's move on to the second part of this section, and that is right-left-hand combinations. And one thing as a young teacher that I had a very difficult time with was when I hit the invention level. It seemed like the combination of the hands and getting them together, it became a big project, and I seemed to get stuck at that point with Bach. And the invention became a chore. Now, one thing I do, I'm going to just work the first 12 measures. This is invention number 8 of J.S. Bach, usually, very often, one of the first that I do. And so what we do is it's nothing wrong with playing hands alone, but then when you go to hands together, it's like overwhelming. So what we do is we do right-left combinations. What do we basically have here? We have 8th notes, we have 16th notes. And my students like to practice this way, so I think your students will too. I do 8ths to 8ths and 16ths to 16ths. So the first week, after we've maybe worked through the fingering, which is essential, they will do 8th to 8th practice. I'm talking by the second week. Let's say I did to measure 12 hands alone and figured out the fingering. Okay, now we're going to do something that's going to work us toward that goal of eventually playing it hands together without them getting all caught up in the coordination between the hands. So then this outline, I'm doing 8ths outline. So it looks like this. I go back and forth between the hands for every 8th note. Then you skip down. And then you get to. Now you're getting the left to the right, the left to the right. The next week, and again, I don't get be a stickler about it. It makes sense to play the first 8th note because on the second measure, because that's what gets you started. So now what's really cool is to realize how the 16ths sweep across the key so much more. If I practice hands alone, I'm going to come up with, right? If I practice the left hand alone, I get this. But what if I suddenly discover that that 16th note pattern covers 2 measures? Together, here's their first together. so forth. And so by having them break it down over a couple of weeks to where one of the things they do each day is go 8ths to 8ths by section, then 16ths to 16ths. Then when I get to whatever week it is, and now I'm going to say, let's put it together, they don't have any problem because they've learned it in little increments by doing the 8ths to 8ths and 16ths to 16ths. Then going to here, it just falls in place because you've snuck in by the back door. So they like the 8th to 8th and 16th to 16th practice. Let's look at another one that's popular that I also like to teach a lot, which is invention number 13 in A minor. The 16ths to 16ths are just plain fun back and forth. There I put in the 8th note because it makes sense. And there's your first section. And we work through it that way. And when we get to putting in those extra and do the 8th notes the same way, and when we get to putting it together, it saves me weeks of time. They're not frustrated, they're not bogged down, and they're not going back to figuring out, okay, this is going, and then this is, you know, you're painstakingly saying 2 to each. You get a more musical performance because they figured it out musically and brought out the musical components first. So this is a way to really, we're already well into the intermediate level. So far we have covered clusters, blocking, melodic practice, and right-left hand combinations. The right-left hand combinations work well with anything, even some of the more contemporary pieces where they're flowing the arpeggios back and forth. Put it into a right-hand, left-hand combination and leave the other notes out, and then, as Whiteside would say, fold them back in. And you get a more musical performance in less time. And the students like it. Especially the outlines where you get to go back and forth and weave between the hands. It really does help with that coordination and gives them that sense of a longer line. So in today's video, we have covered 4 of the basic, or 5 of the basic outlining concepts that I hope you can use one at a time or in tandem with one another. You can use, in one piece, you can just look at it and say, what do I want to do? How do I want to do this? Maybe I should do some blocking. Maybe I should do some right-left hand combinations. But what we're doing is opening up a menu of ways that they can practice that is more musical and gets more done in less time. We'll be right back with some final thoughts.